part of our passion, I think, does come from those wounds, right? Because I think those things help us to give voice to something or to speak to something that helps to create healing through art and for other people who have had it. So it's like there's something within the wound that there's like beautiful gold in there, right? But that's when you have a very certain kind of relationship with it, right? But when you don't have a good relationship, or when you're oblivious to the thing ends up controlling you.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
All right, everybody, jumping into another one of these Way of the Artist podcasts. And, you know, we were chatting before, but not necessarily about any topic per se. It's some interesting conversation we were getting into, though. But I was just going to come in here. I was like, well, what's some stuff that I've been chewing on a little bit? And I recently just finished reading up this book called Practical Mysticism by the author Evelyn Underhill. And it's about mysticism, as you might imagine from the title. Just and something of it's a subject matter that I have had a deep curiosity about for many years in my life. And one thing that came up throughout the book, and it definitely came up again towards the end, and it's something that I've also come across in other, from other authors and who talk about similar things. But there's a reference to the artist that a lot of people who are sort of in like the sort of the mystical, the spiritual realm of things, where they look into the artistic world, the art world, as a way of trying to communicate to just sort of everyday people that this is actually kind of a artists embody a kind of a space of being that has a certain perspective, but a certain connection with life. And I thought that's, interesting that I keep running into it. And something that I thought, like, in many respects, this podcast is a lot about those things, right? Like, what are some of these perspectives? What are these connections? And about nurturing those things and the practice of being an artist, right? Which is, in addition to whatever your, whatever technical things you need to learn within what you do, the bigger thing is always about like the why you're doing it, right? Like the famous question from Stanislavski every time there was a play that was like we want to do this play from the company, or they'd bring, for instance, like, okay, well, why this and why now, right? These asking important questions, which to a lot of people might be very annoying, right? And even to an artist, they can be really annoying. It's like, oh God, do I really have to? Yeah, you have to. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that art is an interesting place where that relationship, that connection that you have with life is so essential to the things you do, the things you don't do, and when you don't do it, I think that's where we start to see a lot of this. I don't know what the word for it is right now, but but a serious lack of art. It's just product, I guess, and everything's just when art becomes fast food, and then at which point you argue it's like, it's not even art anymore. But anyhow, I'm getting a little in the weeds, but really I was just sort of interested in this not even an inference, but like it being said by this person who comes from a mystical tradition, talking about the artist as a particular kind of person who has a special connection with life. That is something that's worth looking at, right? So, and coming from like a mystic, it's kind of an interesting thing. So I'll just leave it there and see if you got anything to pick up on there.
It always amazes me how we'll go away, and we haven't really talked in, I feel like, at least a couple weeks, and how we'll go away and we're still kind of on the same wavelength around certain things in different way, but still on the same thing. Because like, this is a big thing I've noticed with my business is like, yeah, why this, why now, is a good question. And, at first I was like, I shouldn't say at first, for a while I was fighting it, and I was like, just, you know what to do, like, just do the thing, and at first what I was doing was just blaming myself. I was like, well, you're just lazy and you're just not up for it, or you're afraid, it's an anxiety. It's some trauma from the past that you need to like heal. And I kept like, whatever that feeling was that was like resisting and like going, no, something's wrong, something's not right. It was always just, I was defaulting into this, like, it's you have to figure something out about yourself. And if you just figure out about yourself, then you'll do the thing. And so, I don't know. I shared this on the podcast a little while ago. I got a job at a restaurant because like I've been kind of wanting to work away from my computer, because like all I do is I write and then I'm on my computer building my website, and then I'm teaching online in class. And yeah, when I'm online teaching in class, that is pretty social, but I'm like not out in the community and I'm not meeting people. So that was a big part of getting a job or a couple jobs, right? And just getting me out there. And it's funny because I was like, I'm excited to go to the restaurant. I like wanted to. And then I was like, oh yeah, I was actually happy I got a shift. I'm like, this is fun. I like it. And I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm connecting with people and I'm meeting all sorts of people in the local neighborhood. And then I meet someone and then I run into them on the street and they introduce me to someone else, and it's been great, And I'm like, well, why am I not excited about my business? Like, this is stuff I created. This is stuff I care about. I'm excited about my novel that I'm writing. I'm excited about going to the restaurant, but I'm not excited about teaching people how to write a script or make a movie right now. And I'm like, I don't even want to do it. And I'm like, well, why don't you want to do it? And I'm like, do you still like making movies? Do you still like writing? And I'm like, I love making movies. I love writing scripts. So why don't I want to share that with people? And I started to realize, I'm like, it's like I'm doing it from the old version of myself. Like when I started in the film industry, I suppose there was this kind of like, hey, I can do this. I could be a part of this. Like that was the novelty of it, and just like feeling like it was magical. And then at a certain point, it's like, hey, I could get some recognition for this. I could, this is a bit of like status and whatever. And it started to become a little bit more about that, I think. And, and like I can make some money. And I think like anybody who starts a business, I think there's a certain element of like, hey, I can make some money. And I made decent money from this business. But the thing is like, money wasn't even motivating me. Like, and it's like this like block. And so, yeah, it's funny because just before you said that, before we recorded, I was saying to you, like, yeah, that's a big thing. It's like, why do I want to do this? And I realized that it's like, I still do want to do it. It's just that and this might sound I don't know if this sounds mean or what, but like, I don't want to do it with certain people. And I don't want to do it for certain reasons. And I don't want to enable somebody into their ego. I don't want to help people who are doing it out of ego and doing it out of narcissism and doing it out of these types of things, which are there's some of the things that really disgust me about the industry. Like I've lived in Hollywood. I've seen I haven't even seen the worst of it, but I've seen some of the most just disgusting things and just, it's a nightmare. It's ugly. And I don't even want to be a part of that. It's the part of the film industry that makes me disgusted, like literally disgusted. And it makes me want to have no part of it. And then there's this other part of the film industry, which I just love, which is when people get together and they create, and they're, even when you're talking with someone about a script idea, or how do we do this scene, or how do we shoot this in this location? I love that. That lights me up. But when it comes about a red carpet or some award or something, this shit just makes me feel gross. Like it's so fake. It's so false. It's just like, I know there's a little bit of like real in there, but there's so much of like, let me just pat my best friend on the back. And, there's just politics. Say what we want you to say. Think how we want you to think. Otherwise, you're not a part of this fucking group. And there's this part of me, it's like, well, fuck you. I don't want to be a part of your stupid group. And it's like, well, then you can't do this. And there's a part of me that's like defiant. And I'm like, says who? Says you? I'm going to make my own group. I'm going to do it my own way. And I feel like as I'm working through this with my business, I'm like, I want the rebels. I want the people. I want those filmmakers that are like, fuck the status quo. I want to make my own thing. I want to do this. I want to tell this story. I don't care if it's politically incorrect. I don't care if people don't like it. I don't care if it rubs a few people the wrong way. This is the story I want to tell. This is the story I lived. This was my experience. I'm not trying to make everybody included or whatever. This is my story, and I'm going to put my signature on it. I'm going to own it, and I'm going to share it with you. And yeah, it doesn't include everybody, but it's the story that I want to tell, or it's the movie I want to make, or it's the art piece I want to draw. I don't care what it is. And so when I think about that excites me. That makes me want to get up and do this. But when I think about it, it's like, oh, you gotta, I can't say this thing in front of these people. Otherwise they're going to turn on me, and they're going to, and that type of stuff makes me want no part of it. And it reminds me of high school, where it's like, if you weren't a part of the cool group, you were somehow like it's not okay, And I think like what I've kind of come to realize is like, I don't want to enable like a mainstream idea just because everybody thinks this way, or because the majority seems to think this way, or because that's what we're told to think. I don't want to feel like I have to do that to be included. And there's a part of me that's like, you know what, I'll go off and make films and write scripts all on my own, and I won't share them with anybody. I'll just do them because I want to do them. But I kind of like realized, I'm like, yeah, like why this, why now? And, I think something beautiful will be born out of that. At least at the very least, I'll get up in the morning and I'll want to do it. Because the last thing, like, and that's the last thing I'll say about this, I don't like being told what to do. And I don't like being bullied. And I don't like compromising myself to fit in. And when I do it, something inside of me goes, this is wrong. And I think that I had to listen to that voice more. And the more I think about it, the more I put energy towards it, the more I go, yeah, it's not about disagreeing with everybody. It's just about not being afraid to have my own voice when everybody seems to think or talk differently than I do.
Yeah, there's just the image of like jumping through hoops, right? And in so many ways, like it's understandable. It's like even myself as a young actor, it's like you're just doing the things that people are telling you to do because you're excited, you're eager, you want to have a career, you want to succeed. And, to a certain degree also, you're just like, you are just happy to be there.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of joy that you can have in doing kind of shit material to a certain extent. But I feel like that's just that's a phase that you move out of at a certain point. And once you move out of those things, that's when like those bigger questions start to almost of themselves start to kind of creep in. And that's one of the things I've always felt about, for myself with acting, but I believe that this is true for any art that anybody pursues and learns and studies and is passionate about. You go into it, it starts to show you things. It starts to ask you questions about, kind of like, what are you doing here? Right? On both the macro and the micro level, it's like, what are you doing here? And it kind of is just like this quiet thing of, that's always asking you this thing. It's just like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And it's a weird thing, because there is something about the world of artistic expression, for lack of a better expression. There is something about it that it's like it won't do with anything. Like there's something that's so uncompromising about it. Like it's in terms of what it's asking of you, which is interesting that this is coming up, because part of our pre-conversation, we were talking about like, this concept of like something bigger asking something of us. Yeah. I wasn't, but like art can be one of those things where it's like, it is asking something of you. And at a certain point, you stay with something long enough, it'll start asking something of you, which means that you might have to make some hard choices. And you hear about people like that, who have very successful careers, and they're like, holy shit, I really want to do this one thing. I would really love to create like an all acoustic folk album, but I'm been in this fucking hard rock band for all this, which has been great. It's been a lot of fun, but there's this thing, but can I do that? Or like the big film star who's just like wants to go and do some indie that might make them look not like the great, wonderful hero, but as like a really gross and disgusting villain. But there's something so rich, and there's these things come up and we'll ask you of different times to go and do this thing. And it asks you to, and it means that there might be a cost for it, right? Or at least there's a perceived cost for it. But there's a thing about the artistic life that it does not adhere or answer to the sort of egoic calls for money, power, fame. But it's interesting that artists continually find themselves so deep within those places, right? Not very many, but in many ways, so that's where a lot of us want to end up, and some of us do end up. And I don't know, it's an interesting thing that happens, because it's like something else creeps into the picture when that happens, whether it's because you want it or it's because you have it. And I think that like, it's all this thing, because like there's the artists, and the artists are doing something. And then there's all of these people who are like, how can I exploit this? There, or not even just like, I won't say on necessarily put it on just like, certain people, because it's a bigger thing. There's a system of exploitation that goes on there. Just like, oh wow, we have real creative talent that's doing something that's really connected, tapped in, doing something special. How can we take it and, do something with it? Right. And I think that's just, it can get very hairy-carry, because on one sense, if you're doing terrific work, it's really terrific when that gets out to lots of people. Yeah. The capacity, the ability for a lot of people to be moved, changed, whatever it is, by what you do, I mean, that's a great thing. But I think the problem is that it's like that's not ever where it stops. Like it comes with a whole other set of things that go with it, right? A whole set of expectations, its own asks, its own wants. And then you're left living in this kind of space where you have two things really kind of just like pulling you in different directions, right? I'm kind of just wandering in here and meandering, but I don't know if you got anything to say to that.
Something that comes up for me in this is, the artist wound, or just the human wound, where it's like, what wound are you trying to heal or repair or mend or cover or whatever? And I think a lot of people get into the arts because they're wounded, because they, it's very common. You see it everywhere. Not everybody necessarily. There are exceptions, but a lot of people, like, especially the ones who want to be famous, the ones who they really want to be a big deal, all that stuff. That was me for sure. I was wounded, and that wound sometimes, it's like wants attention. It's like hurts, and it's like I want to be loved. I want to be liked. I want to be accepted. I want to be cool. I don't want to be the outsider. I don't want to, and it's like, also, I don't want to be this. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want all that stuff. Right. And when I let that wound run the show, it usually runs me wrong. It runs me down the ego path, and it opens me up to exploitation. It opens me up to a kind of, it's like there is a certain part of this world and where it's a predator-prey thing, and people see you're wounded and they go, "Oh, that's an easy kill. That's an easy one," And I see this happen. I definitely seen this from producers in the film industry, where it's like, that exploitive quality of like somebody's kind of wounded and they're taking advantage of that vulnerability. And I've seen that, and it just grosses me right out. But I've also been that wounded animal that's been exploited, and you're being exploited, for those artists out there, if this resonates with you at all, you're being exploited. I'll tell you how you know. When you start compromising things that are wrong and you shouldn't accept, and you haven't drawn boundaries around it, and you let it go, and you don't feel like you have the strength to stand up. And that's usually when you're wounded. Because if you're not wounded, there's a kind of a quality that you'll have where, you'll say no. You'll say, fuck you. That's inappropriate. And when I started to heal my wound, I started to actually draw boundaries. People got pissed off, Well, you've changed. You're different. I'm like, no, I don't like the way you're talking to me. I don't like what you're doing here. And it took a lot of work because, it was a pretty deep wound, but it's scary when you heal the wound, because then you're also feeling alone, and that can kind of aggravate the wound as well, right? So like people who, are in your life don't want to be in your life anymore because they were in your life because you were wounded, and kind of because they could walk over you or exploit you, or you wouldn't draw a line with them. All of a sudden you start drawing a line with them, and they don't want to be around you anymore. They don't like you anymore. Or they even turn on you. And the thing is what you don't know is that when you heal that wound, you're going to start bringing, like, the people that stay, they really liked you for you, whether you had the wound or not. They like you for you, and they almost applaud you. Like I remember I had a friend, this was actually after the first ayahuasca journey you and I did. I had a friend, and I remember I went for lunch or brunch with them or whatever. And he goes to me, it's like we're talking. He goes, "What happened between the last time you and I hung out?" He's like, "You have changed." And I told him about the ayahuasca journey. He goes, "That explains it," Because like, I just, that journey transformed me. It did. It changed everything for me. And it was resonating. But the thing is that this friend applauded that. Whereas other people, I remember I had another friend, and I had this friend since college, and they were like, well, you're mean, you're different. Like, I like the old you. And I'm like, yeah, but the old me was hurting. The old me was in pain. The old me was suffering and depressed. And this version of me is in my strength, and I'm telling you, no. That person's not my friend. And they never really were my friend, because no friend would want to see you hurting. They wouldn't want you in a low state. So it was polarizing, and it was fucking difficult, because you begin to see, hey, like, this person I called friend for over a decade or more was not really a friend of mine. They got something out of me being wounded. And now that I'm not wounded, they don't like it because they're not getting what they want out of me anymore. And that's exploitation. And whether they know they're doing it or not, right? Because like the other thing is it's not about blame. I think this is another really important thing that I've had to learn, and I would impart this upon any person who is going through this transformation. Be very weary of any time you're blaming. And like, I'm not going to say that I don't slip into it now and then, but just take responsibility. And what I would say is that I brought that person into my life. I accepted them. I didn't draw boundaries, and they kept me company while I was wounded and somehow enabled my wound. And when I healed my wound, they didn't want to be there anymore, and that hurt. But I have to accept that because I was wounded, because I hadn't healed it for that long, they were allowed to stay in my life for that long. And you might go, well, I don't know how to heal my wound. But I think the thing is that as an artist, if you're doing anything for acceptance, for fame, for love, for recognition, for any of these things, that's a wound. That's a clear sign that you're hurting. You're missing something. Something is lacking, because you don't need anything from the outside world. And once you have that awareness, it begins to change the way you do things. And you might be scared of losing that too. Like that, you might think, well, what if I don't want the fame and the fortune and the love and the recognition, then maybe I won't want to do this. And that's a scary thing to confront for every artist. I know many artists who have gone through that. Well, what if I heal this and I don't want what I want anymore? And you want to want it more than you want to heal yourself. But you're not realizing that your wounded self, you're getting something out of your wound, and it's actually harming your life, and it will harm your life indefinitely. And ironically, a wound is like, to me, it's something that it promises something, and it says, when I get this, it'll all be good. And I'll tell you, here's the thing about the wound. It's a liar. You'll get it and it won't be good. It won't actually. You know what'll happen? I'll tell you exactly what'll happen. You'll make up a reason why you need more. Because it's a bottomless fucking pit, and it'll never be filled. And there's no amount of fame, fortune, love, recognition, or anything you can put in that wound that will ever make it feel complete. Temporarily, maybe, but then it'll just be empty again. It'll be empty again. It'll be empty again. You have to heal it up. You have to patch it up. You have to love it. And if it won't be healed, you just have to accept it about yourself and just say, hey, this is who I am, and this is a part of me. And you stop trying to change it. And when you stop doing that, then your art starts to be better. It starts to come from a good, healthy place. And who knows what you'll create then, right? But yeah, it's interesting we're talking about this, because it reminds me, it's like, oh yeah, when I'm doing my business, and the part of the reason why I'm having this resistance is because I'm trying to fill that wound again. But I'm like wiser now, and I know that it's not going to work. But also some of these wounds, like you have to also, I think, here's another thing I'll just say, in my opinion, I don't think all your wounds get healed up and patched up in this nice, clean way. I think part of what makes us amazing as human beings is that we have these vulnerable kind of wounds. But the people who are the best with them, I think of like the James Dean or the Marlon Brando or somebody who just kind of, like actors, I don't know, a couple of them who just really fucking owned the fact that they were hurting, you know? And they kind of championed it in a way. And Marlon Brando in particular, because he didn't give a fuck when anyone thought about him. And I admire that so much, but he was hurting so badly, you know? And I've read a few of his autobiographies, or his biographies, I should say, and just heard the story of his life. And, you know, he wasn't a perfect human being. He made a lot of mistakes. But the thing is that I think the thing is that for the art, one thing that made his art have a lot of integrity is that he didn't show up for his Oscar for The Godfather. That's a guy who didn't need that recognition. You know what I mean? Like, but deep down, I'm sure he wanted it. You know, I said there's part of him that wanted it, but he didn't, you know, and then Hollywood didn't know what to do with that. You know what I mean? And, you know, I don't know, I could go on and on about these stories. My point is, though, I think that as artists, sometimes what gets us into the arts is that we have a wound. And so I don't necessarily think it's always about trying to make the wound go away, but stop feeding it. Stop like trying to fill it or like make it go away by getting things that are false, like recognition, love, acceptance, whatever.
Man, you bring up a lot of good things here. A word that's coming up for me with what you were just saying is like, you know, in terms of the wound, because yeah, like I can get that. I can relate to that, you know, like a lot of my, you know, desires for like to when I was younger for fame and, you know, and just like to be a big deal, which don't get me wrong, I still catch that thing going on inside me, you know, at times where it's just like, oh, hey, Evan, you trying to be a big fucking deal right now? And it's just like, why don't we just like not be a big deal? Let's be nothing here for a second. And like, let's see what that allows us to do when not trying to be anything here. But in terms of where that comes from, yeah, it's for sure. It comes from a wound, from an old insecurity and fear and, you know, like, and hurt and stuff like that. And just with what you're saying, what occurs to me is like, yeah, that wound that you have as an artist, if you're not very mindful about it and have a kind of a healthy relationship with it, at the very least, like maybe not healed, but have a healthy relationship, maybe at the very least, is that it ends up controlling you. And it does that both on an internal level and an external level in terms of, because the world just starts to reflect that whole thing. It's just like, oh, well, you want to be this, don't you? You want to be famous. Oh, okay. And now you're trading up your freedom as a person, as an artist, and exchanging it for really, I think, just an illusion of control. But you're also being controlled by the thing, right? Because it's not allowing you to act and express authentically, right? It's not creating the space that you need to do great work. I mean, this is something that we've talked about quite a bit before on the show. Just there's all of these things though that come up for you as an artist, and if you've always got your eye on how's this going to look to other people, will people hate this? Will people, oh, I can't say this, I can't do that, I can't show this, I can't reveal this, I can't be honest about this. Like these things, like when that kind of stuff is going on, when you're in the creative process, it's just like you're not free. Like that's just it should be pretty obvious that that's not freedom in your work. Like you are being controlled by the idea of some thing that you want that's coming out of a hurt, right? Which is that I want adoration. I want to be accepted. I want all of these, you know, again, whatever it might be. And as long as that's kind of like swimming around in the pool with you. Like it's it's like putting like that, like a drop of food coloring into like the water, right? It's like how many drops are you letting in, and it just disperses. It's kind of just every drop is just permeating the entire glass of everything, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like what I'm saying there, it's like and in so many ways, it's like, I think that as an artist, you are trying to control that dropper. I feel it's like in so many ways, you're trying to control that dropper it's like, oh, no, stop that thing, because like that just enters like, oh, I was just about to do something that was coming from a place of, oh, wouldn't this make me look cool? Or wouldn't this sound, whatever. It's like, drop, right? When you let those things through, it's like, drop. One's gone in there. And it's just one. But it's still, it's changed the color of the entire thing. Right. And that, like, I don't know if there's if there's any way of not getting any drops in that glass of water. I think it's probably a bit of an impossible task, but regardless, it is in so many ways the task of the artist, because there's something that we see when someone has done something great, where we say something to the effect of like, it's so pure, right? When we say something that's like, oh, the expression is so pure, right? It's like, it's because we recognize that there was something that in there that evaded the influence of ego and outside forces and whatever, and managed to express itself in some kind of way that is can be so true and so profound, right? In whatever the medium is. And yeah, I think it really does come down to, like you were saying, those wounds. Like those wounds, while they are a part of who we are, it's like, it's a part of our story. It's a part of what has made us, and it's a part of, in many ways, part of our passion, I think, does come from those wounds, right? Because I think those things help us to give voice to something, or to speak to something that helps to create healing through art, and for other people who have had it. So it's like, there's something within the wound that there's like beautiful gold in there, right? But that's when you have a very certain kind of relationship with it, right? But when you don't have a good relationship, or when you're oblivious to the thing ends up controlling you in so many kinds of ways. And that's just like death as an artist.
It's interesting, that something that came up for me while we're talking about this was one other thing about the wound is when you don't, I like how you put it, having a healthy relationship with it. I feel like that's more manageable and approachable than healing it. Because I do feel like we talk a lot about, oh, you got to heal yourself or heal your wounds or whatever. And like, you get that a lot in the spiritual world. Like, it's like, oh, you got to heal. It's like, it's not always that you got to like heal the actual wound. It's more like you got to heal your relationship to the wound, I would say, a lot of the time. Because like the wound is never really going to go away. Like if someone does something that really like is just a really like cruel or mean thing, or something happens, like you lose somebody you love, that wound doesn't really like go away. It's not like you heal it in the sense that it's just, you kind of heal it, but as an actor, like my grandmother passed away when I was like 17, and she was like a second mom to me. I mean, she was amazing. She was around so much in my life. And like, you know, I can still think about her and it can still hurt. But like, I have a healthy relationship to that now. Like, I have a healthy relationship to, you know, being so grateful for the time I did have in her life, because it could have been 1 day less, 1 year less, 2 years less, right? Like, who knows, right? And like a lot of my friends, you know, their grandparents are passing away now and they're hurting. But like, I always try to remind people, I'm like, I know this hurts, but like, focus on all this time that you had with her, or had with them, and, somebody who's a healer, often has a pain that others don't have. And that's actually why they're such a helpful person on their, on their side, is somebody that can kind of help you have perspective on sometimes your wound, right? Because whatever wound anybody has, no matter how minor it may seem to someone else, it's very real to them, whatever it is. And, one thing that like, little kids, like, they're experiencing their first hurts ever. And like, for them, it is the biggest thing in the world. And your first heartbreak is the biggest heartbreak in the world, because it's the first one and it's the only one you've ever experienced. And then later, after you've kind of healed that and gone through it, if you manage to do that, those things, they don't rock you as much, right? Something I was thinking about was like, I'm playing for a men's soccer team in this local area. And, I had a thought as I came back from practice the other night. And, I'm like, it was kind of like this thought was like, well, what difference does it make whether you win or lose or do any of this stuff? And I was kind of like, none of this fucking matters. And there's something true about that. But I was like, that's not really true, because I don't know the impact that I'm having on all these other guys on the team and the people and their partners and other people that are showing up to this. I don't know the impact that I'm having on everybody. And the last practice, the last two practices, actually, like, I'm the new guy on the squad, right? So I'm like not even really established, and I'm just trying to kind of get back into shape so I can really keep up. But I showed the guys some, like, because I played like pretty high division stuff, right? And I had great coaches, and we won the provincial cup. So I know a few things, and I had some good training, and I taught them some stuff. And I said, here's a drill you can use to shield the ball, and a way in which really they can dog the other team. Like, they just run their hearts out and they'll never get the ball. And I really was like explaining to them the last two practices. I showed them some drills because they were like, okay, they let me basically coach. And, these drills, like, one of the things I was trying to tell everybody was like, what I learned was that a lot of people think of ball control as I'm controlling the ball. That's what most North Americans think when they think of soccer. But I was trying to impart the idea onto them. Ball control it means you have the ball, but you're controlling the play. So I want you guys to start thinking of it more like you have control of the play. The ball is like at your feet, but the thing is you're controlling the play. And so this is a different way of looking at it, because then you start to think, hey, I'm controlling a certain amount of how the play moves and what everyone else does right now. Because a lot of people, they get very focused on, I got to keep control of the ball. And they're only focused on the ball, and it's just them and the ball in their world. And I feel like artists do this. It's like just you and the ball, you and your little art piece, and that's all you're thinking about. But there's all these other players on the squad. There's all these other people running around, not just your team, but the other team. And they're responding and reacting, and you're having an influence on that. And after these last two practices, like, everybody thanked me. And one of the guys said, man, I've never been coached before. He's like, this is great. And I was driving home and I was thinking, I was thinking about that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, and how, like, it kind of shows, like, what would happen if he committed suicide and he died and he wasn't there anymore. Like, what would happen to the town, right?
I thought it was just he left. Not that he killed himself.
Yeah, because he considers committing suicide, like ending his life. His life's not worth enough to exist anymore.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, like, what if I wasn't here? Like, what if I wasn't here with this team? And I was thinking, like, what if this team ends up folding? Or what if these guys don't end up keep playing because they're not excited about soccer, or they don't learn these things, and the team doesn't have the cohesive quality that, there's something I'm bringing. I don't even know what it is, but there is a quality that I'm bringing. And I don't know the influence that'll have, because maybe it keeps the team together, because I know this team is on the brink of folding, or at least they were. And it's like, maybe it keeps them together for another season. Maybe that helps them keep together for another season. And maybe that transfers over to their kids, and maybe some of these guys start teaching their kids some of the stuff that I've shared with them, that I've learned. Who knows what this impact has, right? And it's like, yeah, you're just playing men's league in some small town, and who cares? What's the big deal? But I think this is one of those things, is like artists and just athletes and anybody. I think what we need to start thinking about is like, stop focusing on your wound and what you're trying to get and how you're trying to fulfill that thing that like feels like it's missing in your life, and focus more on like, what can I do with this wound that could somehow help people? I've shared this many times on the podcast. I spent a lot of time riding the bench when I played for some of these high division teams, and I had to watch the play, and I had to learn, and all these guys were better than me. And I had to learn how to play at their level, and and even succeed beyond them. I had to figure out how to do that. But when you're trying to figure it out, you have a different perspective than the people who are in the game. It gives me a very good coach mindset. By the way, when you're on the bench, you're listening to your coach's coach a lot. So so I had these great coaches, and I was learning from them. I wasn't playing, but I was learning. I was listening. I was there observing. I got to be a fly on the wall. And a lot of the players who were better than me, who were on the field, they were missing that, but I was getting that. And so there's something that I can offer, right? And so the thing is I think I want to just say this, in this conversation, is that you as an artist, you might be thinking, man, I'm struggling. Everybody's better than me. I'm not good at this. But what's the position you're in? Even if it's not on the field, that's somehow advantageous. Because maybe that is somehow meant to serve whatever you're supposed to do.
No, it's like I'm stuck on the part of you talking about like hearing the coaching from the bench. I was like, oh yeah, that's so true. It started making me think of like a lot of NHL coaches. I'm sure coaches in other leagues and stuff like that it's a similar story, but it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of NHL coaches who like they weren't the star players on their teams. Like a lot of them had long careers and were great players for sure, but a lot of them were not like the big superstars. They a lot of them are often, you'll find they were like third, fourth line guys, that were just like they played role positions, and they had specific jobs to do, and they learn a certain, they get a certain kind of knowledge of the game, right? Not to say it's necessarily any better or worse, but it just, what you're talking about just kind of made me think about that. But coming back, it was, the word that's jumping into my head right now is care. Like it's the stuff that we choose to care about. It's the stuff that not even necessarily choose to care about, because very often things we care about, it's not really a choice. Especially the really important things are usually, they're things that we don't have control over. It's, there are things that they do something to us. They have an effect on us. And that's in many ways why we care about them, right? Because there's just something intrinsic about that relationship. But there's, in terms of this conversation about, like what the artist does and all of the surrounding things around being an artist. And it's like how much of it is really about where we are putting our care into. Because I think it becomes more confusing because there's a lot of, we had a conversation about propaganda not long ago. Like some of it's propaganda, but some of it is just, what people actually think and believe. But it's very often that comes down to, you could distill a lot of that down to is like, oh, you need to care about this thing. You need to care about this, and you need to care about this, and you need to care about this, and you need to care about this. And you're like, oh, holy shit, I just wanted to sing songs and play my guitar.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's not that you don't need to be aware, mindful of other things that can be brought to your attention, but like, I think that you start to care about too much of these outside things, and you stop caring about just singing the songs and playing the guitar, the whole thing that it was actually really about, the thing that you started doing probably because there was some sort of joy that you had there. And joy, is a very complex emotion. Like joy is not just like living in perpetual states of happiness. Joy is kind of a pervasive thing that can also, there can also be a lot of other incredible emotions that are happening within joy, right? Like, and I've definitely like experienced this in my life. I've experienced this as an actor where I'm just like, oh wow, I'm having such a great time, but I'm like, at this moment I'm in agony. Right. But there's a certain kind of just ecstaticness that it's all kind of riding along with, or that it's riding in kind of a thing, if that makes sense. And I think that, coming back to what I was saying kind of like at the very beginning, that there's this lens, there's a perspective and a state of being that seems to be acknowledged by people from outside of the arts as being something that is different. It is, and by different, something that is in deep relationship and connection with life in a very particular kind of way, something that can see beauty, but also give some kind of voice to it, can speak to it in some kind of way that is true and translatable, and can reach across and touch, from one person and touch you, across the world now. I was going somewhere with that, but I think I'm still got a bit of like still shaking off a bit of a head cold, so I'm not as sharp as I would like to be. Although, what's my excuse on other days, Brandon? None. But there's this thing of, I think that it's care. I don't know. I was talking about care. So I'll just leave it with that, where it's like great artists, like there's the reason why they notice that beauty, the reason why they see it is because they care about it, is because they care about that thing more than anything else, right? And everything else gets, whatever time is required and needs, but I think it's like, give it whatever it needs, but don't give it anything more. And I think sometimes we give it way too much more.
I'm trying to kind of like keep up with that last thought there. Give it what it needs, but don't give it any more. I think okay. I'm not actually, can you explain that? Yeah, tell me what you mean.
So what I mean is like, don't give all of the other influences of like, you need to care about this and this and this and this, right? You need to care about how this looks. You need to care about this making money. You need to care about this being a big deal. You need to care about like all that stuff, right? You need to care about how this is going to come across. You need to care about, and it's like, yeah, okay. Like, sure. Like you could probably make some arguments there, but it's like, but how much are you going to put care into those things before they suddenly become the thing? Mm-hmm. Right. And that's, I think, what happens, like certainly what's happened to a large degree in like film and television, which is just like, what you're looking at is a bunch of care being put into all the fucking things that you don't need to be caring that much about. Right. Okay. Right? As opposed to care about what this really great story is, saying something that is really important to you, saying, or whatever it is, right? But too much care going into places where it doesn't need that much care.
So yeah, thank you for explaining that. This might sound a little silly, but like I do consider myself a modern Renaissance man. Like I just want to learn everything. Like I want to learn how to do mechanics. I want to learn how to sew. I want to learn how to cook. I want to learn how to, everything, climbing, riding a motorcycle, driving a forklift. I just want to learn. I want to learn all these skills. I want to learn how to do it all. And I don't have to master all of them, but like those things, there's certain things that I really care about. Like storytelling, I want to master it. I don't just want to learn how to tell a story. I want to master that, but I don't want to master everything. And I think just to kind of point this out is like, as an artist, you can care about learning a lot of different things. And I think like, there's a part of me, I think I love storytelling. And what you find when you start telling stories is that you start to tell a story about a certain subject and you have to kind of learn about it. So then you get curious about it. Like right now I've been very curious about like law enforcement because I'm writing a detective story and I just really I wanted to understand it. I started like, I literally started going like, what kinds of evidence are there? I found out there were like over 20 different types of evidence, and there's all these different ways in which I'm like, I want to understand how the system of detective works, or undercover works. I want to understand like, what are the positions, who's in charge of what, who looks after what. I started learning that, if you're, like the difference between a detective and a lieutenant and a colonel and all of these different, positions and like what they're overseeing, the commissioner, what does the commissioner do? We hear about Batman and the commissioner. Like, what does this person actually do? And it's been very interesting, right? And so now I have this like grasp on these things. So I think like you need to care enough to be informed, but you don't have to be the best. I think like being informed will often give you what you need so that you can go to an expert who's really passionate about that, and then they can fill you in. Their passion, that's, in filmmaking you really learn this a lot because you if you want to make anything, especially if you want to do it bigger, you have to start asking for help. You just can't do it all alone. It will always be small if you try to do it alone. You can make a film alone and in a way it has been done, but like there's no way that you can scale it the way that you'd want to, or the way that's possible, I should say, without asking for help and getting people to do certain things and participate. Otherwise, there's no way to do it, right? And I think that one of the things in this conversation that I think is interesting, we've been talking about care, and we've been talking a little bit about like, I think we haven't maybe said it explicitly, but like where the artist plays their part. Like, I think as an artist, what I've noticed in myself and I've noticed in other artists is usually a lot of our ideas, they start with something like, I'm interested in this, or I had a vision about this, or whatever. It's very, very small. And I like to say that that seed of an idea, we talked about this, I think, in the last podcast, that seed of an idea should probably remain until the very end of the whole thing, because it was what like kind of bore the whole idea, the whole thing. But I also think there's a certain point where you have to let that go. Like, that's not what it's about anymore. Like, that was the thing that got you in and got you started. But then after that, it's about all these other things. And as you start adding more people, more ideas, and things start to become more complex in whatever you're creating or building or developing, you don't want to get too caught up in any of those ideas either. And I think that's kind of what you're pointing out is like, give it enough care, but don't like get minutely focused on something that takes you off. And this is where I think vision comes in, where it's like, vision is a lot about how do I put all these little pieces together and make something? Because, vision is really about not getting too caught up in any one puzzle piece, but trying to see how all these puzzle pieces can come together to create a greater thing. And you care about the greater thing, but you don't, like for example, the director of photography or cinematographer, say they're a key puzzle piece in the part, you don't get too worked up about what they're doing so much that you're entirely focused on that puzzle piece, they might be several puzzle pieces or whatever. They might be a big part of the puzzle, but like, understand that there's a bigger vision you're all putting together. And I think in art, it's about getting away from kind of the narcissism, getting away from the self-indulgence, getting away from anything victimhoody, anything that's like about me, and what I need and what I want and all that stuff. That stuff might actually bore the seed. And I think it's good to be in touch with that. Like, you might say, I'm telling a story because my parents got divorced when I was at a young age, and this really kind of inspired me to tell this story. That's still relevant. But it also doesn't need to be like this thing that we spend all our time focusing on either. It might have been what created the idea or launched the idea. And I don't know if your idea is a movie, a song, an art piece, a painting, like who knows, a statue, but like that thing might have created this masterpiece. But like in the way, even the initial idea is just a puzzle piece. Even if it is an integral seed puzzle piece, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the whole puzzle. It isn't the whole picture. So I wanted to point that out. But I do feel like, we're kind of like at that witching hour, and, we've talked about a lot. I want to share the beer. I'll say one last thing. Why this? Why now? And I want to say one last thought I had on that idea was like, why this? Why now? Can change throughout the course of a creative project. You and I wrote a script called The Townsfolk way back 15, 18 years ago, something like that. It's one of our first things we wrote together. Second script, I think we wrote together. And why this? Why now? Well, let's write a horror film that we can sell and kind of like make our names as writers, and maybe that will open up the door to like do more. Why this? Why now? Okay, that's where we started. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I picked up that script about 3-4 years ago, and I was in Alberta, and I was thinking, maybe I'll make it here. I'm in this perfect little town. It'd be a great place to shoot it. Why this? Why now? Because it'd be a great time to shoot it. And we wrote it, and it's a pretty good script, and I think we could do it. I looked at it, and then I started reworking it, and I was like, well, maybe filming it here is not ready. Maybe I want to change some things. So, and then that spurs on some more ideas. Now that idea developed into kind of a new idea. And I'm like, well, that new idea is not even really the same as the old script. So we might as well keep the old script. And now I got this new idea, and I'll just develop that idea. And maybe we'll come back to that script and look at it again. You and I went on a hike one day. I know I'm talking all over the place. And you mentioned, well, what if this story happened in almost like a different realm or something? And we were talking about that concept of it. And I was like, that'd be pretty fucking cool. Yeah. Like, and the thing is that it's like, sometimes you can have a creative thing and it's done, but it's not ready yet. It's like still in a stage of development somehow. And that, if I didn't start reworking on our script, because I was in Alberta, I probably wouldn't be writing my novel right now. Because all these things, they kind of like were stepping stones now, you know? And this novel's a totally different idea. It's a detective story. It's like totally not in the same thing, you know, sci-fi thriller. And this was like a horror film, you know? So it's like, the thing is what's interesting is you don't know where an idea leads. And I think one thing we have to accept as artists is acceptance. You know, we have to like be willing to let things be what they are and let go of them so we can move on. Because sometimes things are just monkey branching us almost to the next thing. And that's, you know, and that's the creative process it's elusive. It's not always like, you don't start out doing the thing that you actually end up doing. Okay, I'm going to have this beer. I want you to share it. Nutty Uncle.
Yeah. I was kind of like, oh yeah, stout. I haven't had a stout in a little while. Like, let's do it. It's kind of cold. It's that time of year. Nutty Uncle Peanut Butter Stout from Dead Frog Brewery. And, you know, it's fine. Like, it's like, you can definitely taste that like sort of peanut butter sort of flavor in there. And it's, like it's good. I don't know if I would do this one again myself, but it's you know, it is what it is. Yeah. That's all I'll say. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I mean, I do like it. I mean, this is probably not a beer that I would get again either necessarily, but it is, you know, it's one of those beers where I would say it's pronounced. Definitely get the peanut butter. I think if you're really into like, there are certain peanut butter drinks and stuff. Like, I think if you're into that, you'd probably really, really like it, you know? I do like peanut butter. I'm not really into stouts and stuff that much, but I would say this was pronounced, you know? It's a lot of peanut butter, you know? But it's kind of delicious, and it is definitely like a treat. So, I don't know, man. I think I was eyeballing this myself, and it was going to happen. It was going to be on this podcast at one point. So, yeah, but you got it. So, I don't know. Do you want to have any final ideas?
Yeah, sure. Toss it over here. I feel like I've been waffling through this one a little bit today, so I'll try and just wrap it up here on my end of things. And there was just something in what you said just in your last round there, Brandon. And it's something from Dan Millman, you know, and Dan Millman, he's like, you know, the peaceful warrior, way of the peaceful warrior and all that stuff. And he has this sort of saying, which is like, a peaceful warrior does what he loves, but also finds does what he loves, but also finds the love in whatever he does. And just something, you know, you bring back up like writing, like when we work together writing a horror script, which is like, horror is not a genre that I have much particular interest in. And it did start out from a place of like, yeah, let's see if we can make a horror movie, and it could be kind of like a foot in the door kind of a script, because it's a genre where that is a bit more possible, I guess. At least at the time it was. Yeah. And we went into it. And what was interesting about that was, coming back to that word care, is that I started to really care about it. Started to really care about every little thing that we were doing in it. And started to really love what I was doing, even though it was not something I would necessarily really choose to do, you know, had I all the freedom in the world kind of a thing. It was, but not and it comes down to really coming back to that thing of like, yeah, an artist does what they love, but also finds the love in what they do. Yeah. Right? Comes back to the love thing, right? Like, it seems like that was kind of floating around this whole time, at least for me. And it's like, yeah, it's gotta have some kind of connection to love there. And if you don't have the love for it necessarily from the outset. Find it, but it's got to be there. Like the artist always finds the love in something, and that's really the anchor point. That's the true north for what are we doing here, right? What are we trying to say? Like why this, why now, right? Love's got to factor into that somehow, in some form, in some way. So I'm going to just stop before I just keep talking and say a bunch of shit that's not relevant. Comes back to the love. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, well, I hear that. I mean, I'm the same way. Horror is not my genre that I would choose. It's not the one that makes me really want to write and tell a story, but I was the same way, and it came from, for me, a lot of it came from, I had a friend who was a filmmaker. I was in his film, and he got an opportunity to kind of like write and direct a horror film. And I found that inspiring because he got some real money for it, and they made their movie, and, you can watch it on DVD. Of course, it's like a B movie that, is totally forgettable and no one will ever remember, because, a lot of these movies are, but it was very cool. He was kind of like doing the thing, we're all trying to do. And it really inspired me. And, you and I were writing, we had already written one script together, and I thought, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we, this is like, cause you're young, you don't know how anything really works properly. And you're just trying to figure out a way to get your foot in the door, trying to open some things up. And so the why this, why now, I think, sometimes that's a good enough reason. I really want to impart that onto artists. It's like, you might be a painter, or you might be a musician who needs to make a song, or, you just gotta, you gotta do something. And it's like, well, cause you gotta make a song. And why this, why now? Cause look, we gotta have an album. We don't have an album. We're going out and people will go, can I listen to your music? And we don't have an album. So we gotta get a few songs together, and that's what we gotta do. So maybe it starts from there. But I love that you brought in this Dan Millman idea of you love what you do, but you find the love in what you do. Because that is exactly what happened for me with that script, is I started to love it. I started to care about the characters. I started to care about all the little things that happened in it. And if I could even call it this, my judgment about the genre just became irrelevant, because it was just these characters in a pretty horrific situation. And what would you do? And and I think what was so great about doing that project with you is we just kept putting ourselves in the shoes of these people and trying to go what would this be like? And we're like, holy shit, well, I'd probably do this. And we're like, okay, well, let's work that out. And, and I read that script, I read it a few years ago, and I was like, this holds up pretty fucking good. And it was only our second script. And usually when you're that new, usually your stuff isn't very good. But the thing is you can tell that we cared about it, because at this stage, I've been writing for over 20 years. I can have a pretty good eye for a good script and a bad one. And I was like, well, the fact that this even holds up, granted, I did want to rewrite some things, but you could tell there was things were not half baked, we didn't have all the tools. We didn't have all the ways to make the story as say, as emotionally impactful as I probably have the ability to do now. And the thing is though, it's still, because the care is there, it was impactful. There was some good stuff in there. So yeah, I guess what my takeaway from this whole conversation is just this. It's why this, why now? And letting that be okay, that changes. And if your why this, why now started from your wound, don't make yourself wrong for that. I think that's totally okay. I think if you got into music or acting or some art medium because you're I want to be famous, I just want people to love me, or I want recognition, don't make yourself wrong. If that's what got your foot in the door, that's what you needed. But now if that's not driving you anymore, and you're starting to realize that the relationship to that is not really healthy, maybe you still want to do it, but why this and why now? I think that's the real takeaway for me from this whole conversation is I think as artists, we just have to ask that question. over and over and over again. And we have to be okay with the fact that it's not going to be the same answer the next time we ask it sometimes. And that's okay. And maybe that is what art is.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.